Hello and welcome to Golden Geography. Today we're going to be looking at powers and borders and specifically one of the case studies from that. And we're going to be talking about Mali. Mali is an interesting country. It's a significant country in terms of its geographical size and it is found in Western Africa. It is landlocked, which means it does not have any coastal zone to it. So it is surrounded by neighbouring countries, and those countries and its geography influence it. So this is the case study we're going to be looking at. We're going to be thinking a little bit about the impact of global governance, particularly looking at the role in sovereignty or territorial integrity of this country. We want to identify the sovereignty issues and the territorial issues that this country has, the global governance strategies that have been used within Mali, and the opportunities there have been for stability, growth and development as a result of the inequalities and injustices that this country has faced. So we're going to start with some quick questions. Pause the video to see if you can find the answers. Okay, so here we go. Here are the answers. Mali has lots of neighbours: Algeria, Mauritania, Niger, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, Gambia, all countries that are LIDCs and similarly struggle a little bit with their economics and political stability, and make them all fragile countries. Capital city is Bamako. And here's the interesting bit. When we're looking at Mali, there is a very distinctive north-south divide, and in the north we have very different ethnic groups to those in the south. The north we find groups that are Islamic in religious belief. They tend to be nomadic, and we're looking here at the Tuareg, the kind of Arab or Songhu groups to the north. Named the United Nations group established to help Mali, it's MINUSMA. And a charity working there, there's lots of different charities or NGOs that are working in Mali. Save the Children is just one of them. So let's start with some of those challenges. We've already mentioned the fact that Mali is a big country and there's a bit of a north-south divide, so we have clear inequalities there. The territory to the north is very much part of the Sahara Desert, so it's very dry, arid environment, lack of water, which is why the people that live there, the Tuareg, are very nomadic in their lifestyle, whereas those to the south are much more settled and are different in ethnicity and religious background. So we do have differences there. So in terms of sovereignty, the Tuareg tried to declare independence from the south. It tried to establish itself as its own country but failed. There has been fighting in the north as a consequence of that, and particularly trying to control some of the trade routes in and out of the north, somewhere called the Timnez Valley. There's been very little effective state governance in the north because of the fighting and the conflict between different tribal groups there, and because of the geography of it, the extreme aridity and the difficulty in building and establishing infrastructure. That northern state has become quite marginalised from the rest of Mali, from the south and particularly from the capital. And there are multiple ethnic groups trying to control the northern region. In terms of territory, if you look, the boundaries are very straight lines. They have been delineated or drawn up by European colonial powers, and it doesn't really take into account the history and the geography and the culture of Mali. And we have what we call a core periphery divide. The core areas to the south have got good infrastructure, good resources, good governance. The peripheral areas to the north do not, so they do suffer from that. Well, what has been done to try and address this kind of north-south inequalities and the conflicts there and the desire of the north to be independent? Well, the United Nations have been involved. The Security Council, the United Nations Security Council, established something called MINUSMA, which was put in place in 2012 to try and help support the political system of Mali, but also to bring security and peace to the north. ECOWAS is an economic union of countries in Western Africa, and the African Union itself have been involved in trying to mediate and return power to kind of like more of a civilian administration rather than the United Nations or kind of local military, trying to put more of a civilian democratic approach in place. And NGOs or charities have been involved in helping alleviate poverty, particularly providing education and healthcare. So we've got different strategies at different levels. United Nations, big organisation, lots of resources, but potentially lacks the local knowledge. ECOWAS and the African Union have a much more African-centric approach, so they understand elements of the tribalism and they understand the culture and the geography a little bit better, but do not have the resources of the United Nations. And NGOs are great, but they can lead to over-reliance. Rather than state provision of healthcare and education, NGOs end up taking on that role, and sometimes countries become over-reliant on their provision. So what opportunities are there in terms of stability, growth and development? Well, MINUSMAS has been providing political, social and economic stability throughout Mali. They've been providing military force, they've been supporting the local police. They've been helping the government to provide legislation to impart the law. They've been trying to set up democratic elections, trying to protect human rights, particularly those of children and women, trying to promote international norms and behaviours, and trying to really re-establish control in the north and access to the north and the infrastructure there, providing stability. Once you have stability, then you can help growth. GDP in Mali is recovering, it is improving. There has been a reduction in imported goods and dependence on imports, particularly for basic things like food. There has been increasing economic diversity within the country, and smallholder farmers are receiving support and help from the World Bank to build and develop their farming and make it more productive. In terms of development, the United Nations is aiming for stability first, then development. Development will only come once we have stability. WaterAid is a charity that's working on developing water supplies and sewage, and Save the Children is working to provide education and address issues like child marriage and inequalities. So there is some development, but it's limited. The provision of stability is important first before you will experience growth and development. So what challenges are there? Well, there is definitely inequality between the North and South, but there is also injustice, and there is also inequalities and injustice within the North. So North-South inequalities exist. The North is underrepresented politically. Bamako, the capital city, and the political systems of Mali are in the South. There is deep-rooted cultural and linguistic divisions between the North-South. There is different ethnic groups. And although the international community has tried to deal with the North as one group to bring unity, it has not really addressed the individual tribal groups within the North. So there is still that conflict between the different groups within the North itself. And there are injustices that they are trying to deal with. The government's inability to police its own country has led to problems like smuggling and kidnapping, which in itself undermines the role of NGOs. NGOs have a duty of care to their employees. And the government is unable to protect its own citizens from things like human rights abuse, particularly women and children. And that's evidenced in very high levels of child marriage or FGM, and these are things that need to be tackled and addressed. There's also high rates of child and maternal mortality. If you have very young child marriage, you will find that you will get young teenagers who are pregnant, and that will lead to child mortality. So there is problems there with infant child mortality as well as mother mortality that is a result of those human rights issues. Okay, here's some questions to have a little look at. Pause the video and just have a little think about how you would use this case study to address those questions. And here's some essay questions that you might get. Again, pause the video, just have a think, maybe do a mind map of how you would answer these questions. Thanks for listening.